Welcome to another edition of Voice of the Diaspora. Neon Howard, an alleged accomplice of notorious Mazaruni Prison escapee, Smallie, was shot and killed last Sunday. The Guyana Police Force has reported that while under arrest, Howard grabbed the policeman's gun and was shot and killed. Joining me on Voice of the Diaspora are retired Assistant Police Commissioner Paul Slowe and Attorney at Law Ronald J. Guyanese are suspicious of the police account and are wondering whether extrajudicial killings have returned to Guyana. Norman Brown, Voice of the Diaspora. Join us after this break.
Song from my land. Rose up early this morning to the sounds of crying. Another mother shedding her tears. Oh, yeah. Why all the pain and suffering? Why all the senseless killing? Could it be that nobody cares? Oh no. So many sons lost in the slaughter, blood running in the streets like water. A gun in hand knows no friend. No. Warmongers selling death in my land, getting rich off the souls of we children. Can you tell me when will it end? How many more must carry this load? Oh, how many more? How many more? How many more? Before we trot down Zion Road. How many more? You hear my plea? Send a happy hand for the country. In man there's no solution. No. I'm begging for the children's future. Oh, Jah, drugs got them by the collar. How can we stop this mind pollution?
Why must we carry this load?
Too many starving and too many hungry. Too many homeless souls in the city. It seems like there's no. Too many big shots and too much connections. Too many loopholes in Babylon system. But yeah, how can your children go? How many more? How many more must carry this load?
Retired Assistant Commissioner of Police Paul Slowe and attorney at law Ronald J. Daniels. Welcome to Voice of the Diaspora. Before we get into the program, I would like, it's your first time on the show. Paul, Ronald, if I'm permitted to call you Paul, Ronald, you are no stranger to the program, but you.
Before I express my views on what transpired during the course of during the course of the unfortunate killing of Mr. Howard, I just want to put in the public space what is being received by me as a damning revelation that as recently as after 1 p.m. today, there's been no official communication to the family of Howard about his death, about the transport of his body. There's been no invitation to the family to identify the body or no communication on the way forward. And when I say absolutely no communication to the family, there has been none, which is quite telling as to how we do things in our Guyanese society. And it gives an insight into the degradation of the fabric of our society. Now, in terms of the killing of Mr. Howard, one on the face of it would classify this killing as an extrajudicial killing. The police's story, of course, doesn't add up. The police indicated that the first report that I personally came across was that there was a confrontation between the police and Mr. Howard, and Mr. Howard was shot during the course of that confrontation. Subsequently, a photo showing Mr. Howard clearly apprehended surfaced, and then the narrative of the police was changed, that Mr. Howard, while being transported after his arrest, lunged at one of the police officers to grab his gun, and he plunged off of the ATV that was transporting him. And Mr. Howard, one of the police, shot Mr. Howard with an AK-47 while presumably nursing the wound from an AK-47. Mr. Howard was still cranking the gun that he presumably grabbed from the police officer, and that is when another officer armed with a 9mm shot and killed him. Now, one would expect that, and even before I go there, I don't necessarily fault the police for not putting out a wanted bulletin for Mr. Howard. If the police, especially given the circumstances, are following leads in attempt to either apprehend persons who might have been complicit in the escape of quote-unquote Smallie,
Yeah.
they don't want to alert persons that you're coming looking for them by putting out a wanted bulletin. But Mr. Howard was clearly apprehended, and one would expect that in those circumstances, the police would want to ensure that he is properly secured. And from the video or from the photograph, you see that his hands are out of view, which gives the impression that his hands were secured behind his back.
Yes.
And one do not imagine that if the police are transporting Mr. Howard, they are going to transport him with his hands in front of him, handcuffed or not handcuffed, in such close proximity to police officers who are armed. That, of course, is not standard operating police procedure. And also, it really stretches the imagination that Mr. Howard, in those circumstances, when obviously heavily surrounded by police officers, being transported by numerous police officers who are heavily armed, would want to grab one of the police officers' firearm in an attempt to escape. It just doesn't make any sense. And if that narrative is not already fanciful, Mr. Howard was presumably shot with an AK-47 round. Now, this is a massive round. This is not your run-of-the-mill type of firearm. This is an assault rifle.
It's an assault rifle.
And he would have had to be shot at close range if the police were to be believed. And you were telling me that a man who has been shot at close range with an AK-47 is going to still be cranking a gun. Well, he's still holding the gun to begin with. And then he's still going to be cranking the gun to do what? And under the circumstances where he must have been in restraints, how far would he expect to get in those circumstances? He had to be in those circumstances, the police are to be believed, quite suicidal. So the police's narrative does not make sense. And the changing faces of the police's narrative, right, brings into stark question the credibility of the police in terms of their utterances to the public, and of course, the employ of what in those circumstances probably should have been effective police procedure, especially since Mr. Howard was detained and clearly without any resistance.
Thank you, Ronald. Let's go straight to Paul Slowe here on Voice of the Diaspora. Paul, you have a lot of experience in policing. You rose to the rank of assistant police commissioner. You came up the ranks. You have been a part, I think, of the police service, chairman of the police service commission, if I'm getting that right, and so on. When you look at the police account of what transpired, what are your thoughts?
Well, thanks again for the invite. And I want to join with Ronald to express condolences to the relatives, friends, and colleagues of those children who died in Maja, and also to the relatives, friends, and colleagues of Mr. Howard. Now, when I first saw a news flash on this incident sometime Sunday afternoon, I immediately became concerned because what I read suggested, and this is what they said, that there was a shootout. I made a note of that. I can't remember which one of the outlets said that they were quoting from the police. They said that there was this shootout with this gentleman and he was shot fatally. I was an experienced person. When I hear shootout suggests that both set of people, that would have been the police/joint services, because while we continue to say police, I get the impression that it was a joint operation between the involving police and members of the Guyana Defense Force. That is the impression I am getting. It was a joint operation. So I wanted to know, how is it that there is a shootout and no firearm was recovered, especially when they stated that Mr. Howard was the only other person? One would perhaps assume that if there were others involved in the shootout, the firearm that he is alleged to have had might have been taken away by the others. If they were in the vicinity of some river, maybe it fell over. But I found that very strange that there was a shootout, and the report is that no firearm was recovered. So right away, I said this story cannot be credible. Now, following that initial version that I got, I saw a photograph with someone who is said to be Mr. Howard lying on his back. It appears as though his both hands were behind his back. He was restrained. Someone is there standing, and I can tell you this because I examined the photograph carefully.
Yes.
Someone is standing with a right foot. A right foot, he has had a crock. A right foot resting on the torso of Mr. Howard. And so right away, I said, well, how can that be? And he was clearly alive at that stage. You can see that when he was lying on his back, seems to be restrained, he was alive and looking up at the persons who were there with him. So the concerns continued. And then to make things even more murky and even worse, then the release came out, that bull, I would want to call it, which says that Mr. Howard was being escorted on an ATV. He was on an ATV, and during the course of that, I don't know where they were taking him. During the course of that process, he snatched a rifle, an AK-47 rifle, from one of the ranks, and I'm very carefully one of the ranks. I'm not sure if it's a police or a member of the GDF.
Okay.
He then jumped off of the ATV. He attempted, according to crank this rifle, presumably to make it ready to fire, at which stage they say 4 shots were fired at him with an AK-47. They were very specific about that. One of the rounds struck him. He fell into a pool of water, and he continued to attempt to crank, as they say, this rifle, and someone with a pistol shot him and fatally. Now, let me say this. I was not there. None of us was there. So I am going based on what the police reported.
Yeah.
That is what they reported. And if that is the story they are going to put out there, it strains the credibility. The thing is so strange and so bizarre that no sensible person reading through this can believe what they have said. And I want to make this point very, very clear. I have been involved in several operations. I can say this, that you are likely to be confronted in situations as the police, the giant services, where you have to use lethal fire. You have to use lethal force. And lethal force is permitted under certain circumstances. So if you're going there and persons fire at you, then you're expected to defend yourself and to shoot back. And if the person dies, well, then there's a process to be gone through. But I'm saying that the story that is put out by the police does not add up. Somebody say the maths is not mathsing. It's strange credibility, and no one who is sensible and dissect what they said. And I'm emphasizing that. That is not what some stranger said. That is what the release that the police gave as to what occurred. That is bizarre. It is bizarre. It is difficult for some sensible person to believe that version.
It's bizarre indeed. And so the version, in your opinion, Ronald and Paul, that version that the police gave, to you, does it appear to be a lie? Because if the truth is told, a man of your experience, a former police officer of your experience, a lawyer of your caliber, would be able to read the police account and say, it makes sense. In this case, would you consider the police lying?
Well, let me jump in front of Ronald. Please permit me to say that it makes no sense. It is not logical for you to have given a release to say there was a shootout, no firearm is recovered. Then I don't know if the picture that was the photograph that was released is an official photograph, but then the photograph appears on social media with Mr. Howard lying on his back, seemingly restrained, someone with a foot on his torso, and then later to say that this man was being escorted. Now, even if we were to give them the benefit of the doubt, to say, well, this man was being escorted, it was clear that when he was lying on his back, his hands were restrained behind his back. So how is it that when he was on this ATV, he was able now to snatch this assault rifle on the lap? And that is something too that I find very, very strange. You are in an operation. You are going behind dangerous criminals, notorious escapee, and your firearm is on your lap. That is what they're saying. The AK-47 was on the lap of one of the ranks when this thing was snatched from the person. This is really, as I say, it is
incredulous.
It is difficult to believe. It's incredulous.
Ronald.
Thank you again, Arman. I will go a bit further than that to say that I don't consider this just to be a lie. I think it's a testimony of the esteem that the Guyana Police Force holds the rest of society in. Because if you're going to put in the public space, especially through official channels, a story that is so fanciful that it simply doesn't accord with anything in reality, and it's one which incredibility can be detected by even the smallest child, by the employer of, just common sense. It is saying that we have no regard for you as a society, and we are confident that we can just go about killing people with impunity. Because if you anticipate that there are going to be some repercussions to your actions, of course, you would want to perhaps, put some consideration into the narrative that you put into the public space and to say to the public something that, even if it's going to be tested, that it at least on the face of it stands up logically.
Ronald J. Daniels there, attorney at law. Paul Slowe, when we look at the police accounts and the police, and as a former policeman, a police officer, high in rank, is it standard procedure for the police to issue a wanted bulletin for someone of that nature who's dubbed, who, is dubbed a
I doubt whether Howard name would have been there. So now that Howard is killed, you couldn't then go back and say that he's one of them. But the fact that you have not indicated the names of that person, anyone who you encounter and is arrested or killed, you can then say, well, they were one of the persons who was involved in the escape of Smallie. That to me, that is what is going on.
But if there were, Paul, and I want to ask you this question quickly before I go to Ronald. If there were an internal investigation or an investigation against the police in this matter, even if the police said it was some sort of operation where they didn't want the public to know who these accomplices are, would there be any record there in the Guyana Police Force that can prove, that somebody could just say word of mouth or somebody could just write something and put any date it, but would there be any record there that can prove that this was on the table before he was killed?
As we have seen, again, if we go back to the release, Smallie escaped 2 Fridays ago. They claimed that one of the accomplices, they know the accomplice because they said he was charged for murder. So obviously, the record will be there. Now, remember too that an investigation was done, resulted in the charge of 4 prison officers and 2 civilians. So record must be there as to who the persons were. If not all the names, and based on what they have said, only one name, because you would not know, because they said that 2 men aided in the escape. They said one of the men is a convicted accused. He was convicted of murder. They did not say who the other person was. So it is clear that they have information and they have records. So any investigation ought to unearth who these people really are. Even if you don't have the name, you're going to have description, and investigation may very well lead to your the name, because they said this thing started at Thursday at Parika. With all the cameras and all the people around, it should not be difficult to identify who these 2 men were.
Ronald J. Daniels, your thoughts?
So the impression I got from the reports that I've read is that when they're pursuing this trail into the interior, it was disclosed by someone that Mr. Howard, as well as Smallie, had conversations with persons under duress. So I took it for granted that if the police are to be believed, that Mr. Howard was identified in that process, whereby description, whether by name and description, whether by name alone, and based on that information, they were seeking after him there and then. And I know that when the police is running certain operations, of course, they may not want to give persons a heads up, so to speak, so that those persons, of course, can make themselves evasive. In instances when the police detain suspects, right, they will try their level best to even prevent the suspects from communicating with attorneys, and quite unfortunately, they would offer as explanation in those circumstances that they don't want information to be communicated that would make the apprehension of other persons of interest difficult. Or the police may go to the courts in those circumstances to seek an enlargement of the detention time to keep persons in custody because they don't necessarily want their investigations to be contaminated in terms of apprehending other persons of interest. So in those circumstances, I maintain that if the police version of events up until that point were credible, that we've received certain information and we're acting on this information, and it is during the course of acting on this information we encounter Mr. Howard, I have no difficulties with that. But having detained Mr. Howard, having apprehended Mr. Howard, and Mr. Slowe in his interview with Starbuck News made a very key observation that in all likelihood he would have been an asset to the police in terms of extracting information that they can use it, that they can use to the benefit
more valuable alive,
achieve their ultimate objective. To achieve their ultimate objective in apprehending quote unquote Smallie. Now that raises a few concerns for me because it says, and I'm minded that the police they employ extrajudicial methods in terms of extracting information from people. I see this on a daily basis. I deal with this on a daily basis as in my capacity as a criminal defense attorney. Now, I'm not advocating that they should have apprehended him and employed those methods to extract information. But you don't know if he had valuable information, whether he would have been inclined to share that information with the police, if the police use honorable, it's almost a misnomer, but if the police were to use honorable methods in extracting that information from him. But the concern it raises for me, it says that if the police are going to execute him in those circumstances, this is an outright execution. It is saying that they have no faith in their capacities to conduct forensic investigations, to retrieve valuable information that they can, in an above-the-board manner, achieve their objective. And it says also that they really place a low premium on the lives of people because you're out there acting as judge, jury, and executioner. This is somebody that you have determined to be a criminal. This is not somebody who has gone through the judicial process. And a pronouncement has been made as properly should be done in a society that holds itself out to be democratic. It also says that you as the police officers, you have no confidence in that democratic process. The rule of law, which is an elemental part of that democratic process. If this is a man who is presumed to have participated in the commission of this ultimate offense, then you gather the evidence against him and you should be prosecuted, and you repose the confidence in the system that once you present cogent evidence, of course, the system is going to make a determination. The courts are going to make the determination that this man is in fact what you have alleged him to be, and to descend a punishment that is proportionate to his crime. So it says you have no confidence in your capacity as police officers. you have no confidence in the criminal justice system, and you have a reckless disregard for life, and ultimately you have a reckless disregard for the citizens of this country who are part and parcel of that so-called democratic process that we're operating under the influence of.
Attorney at Law Ronald J. Daniels here on Voice of the Diaspora. Retired Assistant Commissioner of Police Paul Slowe here, and we are talking about killing of Neon Howard last Sunday. He was killed by police, and the police said that he grabbed a weapon from a police or from someone who were part of the operation, who was a part of the operation, the Joint Services operation. Because Kevin Koch, one of the persons commenting here, he said the murder of Howard was to distract from the
In quite a number of extrajudicial killings, that we call it, and then the action thereafter, I don't think has been to the satisfaction of many, and it is a worrying thing because those of us who have been around long enough will recall what we refer to as the troubled times when people were killed, and many policemen were targeted just because they were policemen. I was in the force at that time, and I can tell you policemen were fearful of wearing their uniforms. I recall a young traffic man in Regent Street performing traffic duties that was gunned down. And so many others were shot and killed just because they were policemen. And people will argue that that came about because of policemen had killed persons innocently, extradition killing, and that was retaliation. So we have to look at this very, very carefully and pray. And not only pray, but hope that measures are put in place so that we don't get back to that unsavory period in our history, that blemished period that people refer to as the troubled times.
Paul Slowe there, retired Assistant Police Commissioner here on Voice of the Diaspora. Ronald, if you were to represent or to defend the family of Neon Howard, if you were to put a case against the police, what are some of the things you would bring out to show that the police has been culpable and they have neglected to follow due process and so on? What are some of the things that for the sake of our viewers?
So I would just want to back up a little to address the concern raised by one of the viewers that the killing of Howard appears to be a smokescreen over what has transpired at Madia. I wouldn't go so far as to speculate that is the case. As an attorney, we operate in the realm of evidence, yeah, and not necessarily in the realm of speculation. But what I dare say is that there is a correlation, nevertheless, between what transpired with Howard and what happened at Madia. It is a testimony, and a glaring testimony, of the breakdown of democratic principles in a society that masquerades itself as a democracy. In the Madia incident, for instance, we see that there were innumerable breaches of procedures that properly should have been observed. We have breaches in terms of building codes, breaches in terms of ability, because that is not the first fire which would have been suffered by any of the institutions, and breaches in terms of fire safety protocols. Now, you can only have those things in a society that has a reckless disregard for democratic principles. Mm-hmm. And we see no accountability for the persons who are responsible in the circumstances of the Madia tragedy. what we see is the young lady who presumably started the fire. She is brought before the court and she is slapped with 19 murder charges. And I take
Charges.
it for granted that number would be enlarged to accommodate the other victim who unfortunately lost her life. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that if she is complicit, then she should not be charged and prosecuted. That is what democracy is. That is what
Is, yes,
a
yes.
respect for and observance of the rule of law is. What I'm saying is that if we existed in a society that was not accommodating of corruption, that was not accommodating of a lack of accountability, then she would not have been the only person who is called to account. And it is the fabric of this culture, the degradation of democratic principles that we're seeing manifested in Madia as well as in the killing of Howard. Now, in terms of, and I know that you perhaps deliberately did not ask me that question on the culture of extrajudicial killings and its political implications because you minded that I don't
Yes,
necessarily want to
exactly, exactly.
I don't necessarily want to be drawn into a political discourse. Now, I always try to be fair and balanced in my commentaries, and I'm minded to observe that extrajudicial killing is not unique to it's not unique to the PPP administration. We've had instances of extrajudicial killing in the PNC administration, well, in the PNC administration, I take it for granted, and as well as during the tenure of the coalition government. But there seems to be a history of extrajudicial killings under under the PPP administration, and we have instances of that dating back from 1992 all the way up until 2015, and then we've seen a re-emergence of those instances. And to name just a few, we had Yancey Douglas, we had Shaka Blair, we had Shaquille Grant, we
Yes.
had Brandon James, and Brandon James is a special case. I'm personally familiar with how Brandon James' execution unraveled. Um, and we have the persons who would have been, whose name would have been cited by Mr. Slowe. We and we have the history of the Phantom Squad. We have the history of the Death Squad, and we have the history of the the um the Black Clothes, which I think and Mr. Slow can correct me here, which was part of I think the tactical service unit. Now, all of these outfits operate as a matter of fact. This is not conjecture. So there is a worrying re-emergence of that culture, and it is one that we should have pushed back against. And the police don't wake up one morning and decide, well, we're going to kill people. They only do that when they're settled that they can do it in an atmosphere of impunity. And extrajudicial killings is the last straw in an assortment of extrajudicial actions which are taken by the police. You have force conflicts which are beaten out of people on a daily basis. You have persons who are being charged for offenses that of which they're not going to receive bail as a consequence of judges profiling and the construction of cases against them. And these are things I can say obtain in fact because these are things that I've participated in the defense of. Well, in the defense of persons whom would have been charged under these circumstances.
Paul, look, We have dealt, I think, satisfactorily with what transpired, the lies coming from the police, and I'm saying that. The lies, the blatant lies coming from the police about what transpired, what caused the demise of Neon Howard, a 33-year-old black man from Friendship, is that on the east bank of Demerara. He was killed last Sunday. I think it's near Bartica or near Madia. Look, Paul Slowe, you have been a tremendously experienced policeman, and you have a reputation. As so many people have said, your principles could not be compromised. I've heard stories. You were not corrupt. You could not be bought. I think you would arrest your own brother if he committed a crime, and that is what I gather from people. For years, I have been hearing about your professionalism in the Guyana Police Force. You have experienced some injustice when the new administration entered office approximately 3 years ago. It is my understanding, and for the sake of my viewers, and I just want to say this quickly, that this program has.
And the minister called me and attempted to order me. To return the firearm to the gentleman. And I told him that the investigation had not reached that stage for the firearm to be returned. And the president himself, Bara Jagdeo, called me to try, as he put it, that the minister complained to him that I had refused to carry out an order. I caused them to know that the minister had no authority to order me in a matter like that. He's not one of my superior ranks. And the president, Jagdeo, wanted me to apologize to Gadraj. And I said, well, look, if Gadraj were to say what wrong I did, I might be inclined to apologize. And I did not. The president, Jagdeo, called me and threatened me. He told me that if I did not apologize to Gadraj by a particular time, he was going to side with Gadraj and I will suffer the consequences. That was in 2003. I did not apologize because I don't think I did anything wrong to apologize. And then they attempted to get me out, move me out of the force. I received letters. I have all of those things. I received letter to say that he wanted to know about the people who were shortlisted for promotion. I was surprised because that list was a confidential list that was not, work had to be done. And I indicated, he asked specific names. And I said, well, look, as I indicated to you, those persons have disciplinary matters pending, and therefore they were not shortlisted. They could not be considered. And the man hit the roof. And he made a lot of noise over it and so on. And I held firm that we were not going to violate the rules of the commission to satisfy the president or anyone else. And the next day, the 24th of December, 2020, remember this? I told him that people with pending disciplinary matters cannot be considered for promotion. We later learned through an affidavit by who is now Assistant Commissioner Calvin Brutus that the promotion shortlist, and this is what he said in an affidavit before the court, the promotion shortlist was leaked to him by a confidential source at the Police Service Commission. So I then got to realize, obviously, the president got to know who the people who were shortlisted as wrote that. Shortly thereafter, about 2 weeks thereafter, a second show cause letter, this time to all members of the Police Service Commission, for us to show cause. Prime Minister again, why he should not advise the president to have us removed from the Service Commission, because this time they allege that we are joined with Member of Parliament, Ganesh Mai Paul, to challenge the, normally that award is kept for persons who attain the rank of Assistant Commissioner. I was a senior superintendent in 1998 when I was given the Disciplinary Service Medal, because they saw that Slowe was a very professional person. But once Gadraj and Jagdu did not get me to do what they wanted me to do, then they started, as the people say in Guyana, the fight down. So it's a long thing, but I'm resilient. I will continue to represent myself, and I am not going to be bullied. I am not going to be intimidated. I will speak the truth. You might know, and others might know, I have a program every Wednesday where I speak out. I expose corruption and incompetence, and I will continue to do so. I mean, I was a bit long there, but I think I've
No,
made
no,
it.
that's quite okay. That is really
Yeah,
okay.
so that is where it is. That and the matters that I refer to, charges against me and the others. I was charged conspiracy to commit fraud with several other senior retired officers and serving members of the force. So I can't go into details. I was also charged for in the what they call sexual assault, where a young officer, female, reported that I touched her legs. I touched her leg during a meeting on 3 separate occasions. Those matters are before the court, so therefore I'm not going to go through, but I'm going to continue to defend myself. I will continue to call out corruption and incompetence, because every day when you look around in the force, there is corruption, there is incompetence, and I will call it out. I also take the opportunity on my program to teach and to educate the young officers, in particular young members of the force, because I recognize that many of them do not know the policies. They don't teach them much, and therefore they, in many cases, they go out there. In this case, maybe they're giving them guns. They send them out there, no proper briefing and all of that. And let me to come to what Ronald said earlier. These things can occur because the environment is conducive to these type of things.
Environment is
Not only the
conducive.
extrajudicial killing, but let's look. One of Ronald's colleagues, one of his colleague.
Good. So this has happened for the first time, and I do apologize to my viewers. I don't know what to do. I have to up my game because I think in uncharted waters now. I'm being targeted seriously, but I have a proper system. A proper system. So whoever is doing whatever they're doing is professional in the business. Ronald J. Daniels, your closing remarks, and then we'll go to Mr. Slowe for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Norman. I just want to thank you again for the kind invitation, and I just want to thank Mr. Slowe as well for the opportunity to share the platform with him. I'm minded that given the culture of our society, that once one is invited to comment on serious issues, there is the inclination to politicize the issues and also to politicize the commentaries on those issues. So, against that backdrop, I want to make it lucidly clear that I personally hold no brief for any political party. I hold no brief for any of the institutions in our society. What I hold a brief for, on whom I hold a brief for rather, are the citizens of my country, the ordinary man and woman who is being sold the narrative that we are existing in a democratic society. In a functional democracy, the democratic institutions must be properly functioning. And once those institutions are not functioning, then of course we
We
just have the
are
pretext
living in a
of
dictatorship. Once they're not functioning,
we
we
just
live in
have the
a,
pretext
you can say that.
we
Go
just
ahead.
have the
Sorry.
pretext of it. We just have the pretext of a democracy once they're not functioning. In terms of Afro-Guyanese, you see instances, and it's very typical in Guyana. If you catch a thief, for instance, or someone who's deemed to be or is alleged to have committed an act of theft, look at the people who would take matters into their own hands to reject, such actions from in their community. So I just want us to disabuse our minds of that notion that Afro-Guyanese are socialized in the commission of crime. Afro-Guyanese are some appetite and for the commission of crime and are inclined to to condone crime. And oftentimes, we focus mainly on the sensational crimes, and we disregard the crimes which have a serious impact on our country's economy, the crimes which have a serious impact on our country's social and political fabric. We oftentimes turn a blind eye to acts of corruption. And corruption is one of the most severe crimes against humanity.
Ago, Trinidad, I think the Trinidad Police Force came in for sanctions where they have withheld training, they have withheld aid to the Trinidad Police Force, that is these international agencies, because they have been accused of extrajudicial killing. And you know, we in Guyana might tend to, well, not we, but some might tend to brush it aside. But these organizations are watching, and the reports are going to be made. And it is, you know, when these reports are made, freedom of the press freedom, corruption, people jump on the eye rail and they make the government, point on the government, and they make all kinds of statements. But the facts are there. Facts are stubborn things.
Yes.
The evidence is there that these things are occurring, and those people are going to compile, are going to use it to sanction the police. So I want to say that this is an issue that the civil society, all groups, should condemn in the most forceful way. Because as was indicated, if we live in what we call a democratic.
But I think this is a part of the struggle. I want to say, thank you very much, Ronald J. Daniels, attorney at law. Thank you, retired Assistant Commissioner of Police Paul Slowe. And I do hope that in the near future we can sit down and talk again. Until then, have a blessed evening.